Events from last night led us all to be here again. I just want to thank you all for being here and being considerate of the families that have lost their loved ones and our police family as well. I know there are several questions been asked since last night of what took place. And part of the updated investigation is what information we can provide to you. One of the questions that were constantly asked by members of the community and the media, how did Sergeant Anders get into the dwelling? Well, we know for a fact that he entered through the rear, back patio door, fired a shot to enter the building, and at the same time he encountered his ex-wife, where multiple shots were fired at her, striking her, killing her, and summarily turning the gun on himself. As officers arrived, they found both of them laying in the house. Chronological events, as we understand it, this information came to us on February 18 based on an internal tip that was provided relative to the need for one of our members and attention given to the relationship between the two parties. On March 12th, our internal investigation looked into this matter, sat down and talked to both parties and understood there were mutual issues and challenges on both sides and thought it wise to place them on administrative leave while we did a further investigation. At that time, issued weapons were turned in. The investigation continued, and during that period of time, when our policy is, and we encourage the use of the officer wellness and employee assistance programs to make sure our members are safe, and safe accommodations were provided to both of them at that time. Also during that period of time, the DV unit was contacted and assigned to her to make sure that she fully understood the value of having reported out on any domestic issues, and both were counseled on that issue. And she was in contact with the DV unit on a regular basis. The DV advocate was also assigned to her. On March 29th, a protective order was issued. It took effect on the 31st. And ironically, it was to be heard on April 29th. On April 1st, we turned over the preliminary results of our investigation to the prosecutor's office, who we stayed in constant contact with during this whole process, and it was under constant review. The services that were provided to the officers based on our wellness, we've expanded on the wellness program here in IMPD, and to the point where we encourage it, even in disciplinary matters, we're looking at the physical and spiritual and psychological well-being of our members. So we encourage use of it, and this is no different, making sure that they're made safe, and that workplace and home is all our paramount responsibility. One of the things we did note last night that Sergeant arrived at the scene in a vehicle that was not of his own. And we have to recognize the fact that there are times when we, as an agency, do due diligence on making sure our people are safe. But if someone is determined to carry out a crime, a particular violent crime, we have to be clear about that in our society that these things happen. We had a similar incident happen. Murder-suicide last night is a good example of that. There are things we're going to continue to talk about. There are going to be other questions, and you're going to hear a multitude of things, and we're going to challenge those things that you know are not true, but we're going to honestly answer those questions that you have that may cause you some concern. We'll gladly do that. So at this time, are there any questions that you may have lingering relative to what I just shared?
What did you mean when you say we provide both of them with a safe environment?
What we do is, Russ, is looking at the fact that we looked at the allegations on both sides. There were issues that we know for a fact that were challenging for us as an agency or any place, a workplace where people have back and forth issues. Oftentimes they're, in domestic situations, there are honeymoon periods where they come back together, they break up, and now allegations on both sides of that equation. So our job is to make sure we don't take sides, but look at what is in the best interest and the safety of the person. In this case, relieving him of the weapons and making sure there was a place for him to go was identified, and a safe place was identified for her to go, and she was staying at that place.
You mean physical places that were other than her primary place?
Absolutely, and making sure if, in fact, you choose to do that. What we have to be clear about is making you understand the options that you have, but exercise on a side of caution is what we ask you to do and encourage you to do, and making those places safe is what we try to do.
Do you know that she was actually staying at the house against the advice of you guys?
We were given information that she was staying in a safe place with someone and away from the house, and made a determination to return back to the house against our better judgment.
Can you discuss any, let's say, daily monitoring through whether it's verbal means or other means that you guys are doing and keep track of both of them several times a day going, hey, it's 1 o'clock, is everybody okay right now?
There were daily check-ins with her and making sure that she was safe and understand we had our best interest at heart. But there are also means we used to make sure he had the same, afforded that same opportunity of verbal and physical checks with him, and using some devices to make sure that we understood that where they were and how they were engaging one another.
Would you describe them as being receptive to this at all?
Was there any point yesterday when he disappeared off the radar?
There were some points that I think we would recognize that in use of another vehicle that was not his own is indicative of that. And I think that to your question, I think there are times when people make a decision beyond our recommendation, and we have to be prepared to take the necessary action when they do that. And we're prepared to do that.
Chief, was the department aware of any threats prior to the shooting?
Threats? There were innuendos on both parties. In other words, there were stories they shared relative to both their acts against one another. And that's why we took swift action, putting on administrative leave and relieving them of their weapons.
Was there at any point yesterday when you became concerned before this incident?
There was nothing, I think, yesterday other than the fact that that the decision to return to the residence against judgment. And sometimes that's a decision, unfortunately, people make.
Last question. If there was a decision to actually do surveillance on this particular officer, if it rose to that level, why wasn't there charges or something like that would go if he was harassing or intimidating or whatever might have been?
Let me go back to my statement about the fact that we have taken steps on the first to provide information to the prosecutor's office. And the prosecutor's working due diligently with us to make sure we were in the law and making sure we could do exactly what you're saying, Simon. We did that. We are recognizing that in our society that this is tough for folk to understand. This issue of murder-suicide is something we all have to deal with. It's tough when there's one of our own, trust me. But again, we saw a situation last night where it occurred. We had 3 suicides, I believe, in the last 24 hours.
Given the volatility of the domestic violence situation and the fact that this has been in the hands of the police department for this long, you were daily checking up on her, both physically and verbally. The weapons were removed.
Yes.
Why wasn't Officer Anders maybe perhaps immediately detained for his own protection and that of Officer Carmack, and then also why weren't his personal weapons removed from the residence?
Well, the residence, we understood the weapons were removed from the residence. I think the question is, and it's something we're talking about now in terms of this whole mental health piece, that we have laws and procedures in which, with our officers and our internal investigations, and SIU and DV did an excellent job in trying to make sure we had the information necessary to do an immediate detention, if we could, legally. Again, it goes back to the law and our ability. We made sure every effort was made, all the information was shared with employee assistance, with wellness, to make sure he was seeing a psychiatrist at EAP. Their job in assisting us is also making a determination if he, in fact, is a danger to himself and to others. And we rely on those recommendations because we legally have to take that forward. And they did do that in terms of reaching out to the prosecutor early on to make sure they stayed connected to this process, and they've done due diligence on their part to try to bring this to justice.
Chief, can you just speak to what you're doing with the officers who work with them?
Well, thank you. I'm glad you asked that because I'm really thinking that we have to remember we have an officer who still remains on the IMPD who lost his mother. We have 1,500 members of the agency who are still grieving from this process. Yeah, we're reaching out to them. We have our post team. We have our chaplains. We're going to continue to reach out to the families and their siblings. This is an important time for us, folks, and we don't take this lightly. We're grieving. The family's grieving, and I know the city's grieving. But again, we have to put arms and prayer around our folk right now, and we need you to do that for us. You're part of us, too. We see you at scenes. You've been there with us. You know how this works. You know how hard the people are. You know these folk. You know them personally. You met them. You spent time with them. And you know how hard it is to hear one of your own. when they're jovial, laughing, joking, but we don't know what goes on inside. This is tough work, and it takes its toll on you. It really does. And we have to understand, we're human. We're no different than anyone else. And because things happen in our society, sometimes we forget the police are not robots. We're people, too.
Can you speak to any previous incidents at that address? Any previous incidents at that address?
Not to our recollection, but again, we were talking about things that we're still making sure we understand, but I think our efforts to make sure they were safe were taken very seriously.
Chief, did the monitoring